The first time I heard the HOA pounding on my door, I honestly thought it was a mistake. It was late afternoon, that eerie hour when the sun hangs low and the whole neighborhood feels quieter than usual. I was in the backyard, running my fingers across the old wooden fence, her fence. My late wife, Laura, and I had built it by hand 10 years ago. Every plank, every nail. She had painted it with the soft blue color she loved. It wasn't just wood to me. It was memory. It was the last big project we ever did together before the cancer took her from me. So when the banging started, angry and impatient, I felt a strange heaviness in my chest. Something told me this wasn't going to be good. "Mr. Porter," a sharp voice shouted from the front porch. "Open up. We need to speak with you about a compliance violation." I sighed, wiped the dust from my hands, and walked around to the front. The sun was behind her, making her silhouette look harsher than normal. It was her, the new HOA president, Karen Delmont. Even her name felt sharp. She had that stiff posture, the kind of self-importance you could smell from 30 feet away. "What's the problem, Karen?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She pushed a stack of papers at me without hesitation. "Your fence. It violates code. Wrong height, wrong color, and it was built without approval." I stared at her, stunned. "That fence has been standing for a decade. Approved and inspected. Your own board has records." She folded her arms, smirking like she had already won. "Not anymore. We updated the guidelines last month. All old structures must now comply. That includes yours. You have 14 days to take it down." Her words hit me like a punch to the stomach. "I'm not touching that fence," I said quietly. "My wife built that with—" "This is not emotional, Mr. Porter," she snapped. "This is policy." But I could feel it already. Something was off. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was pushing, testing. And the way she kept glancing over her shoulder like someone was watching her made the whole situation feel darker. I opened the papers. The violation fee was $1,250. If I didn't tear the fence down, it would double weekly. "This is extortion," I said. "Call it what you want," she replied. 14 days. That's all." She walked away, heels clacking like tiny gunshots on the concrete, leaving me standing there with the sunset burning behind me. But the moment she reached her car, something strange happened. A police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. The officer inside glanced at me, then at her, and she immediately straightened up, her smile turning unnervingly stiff. It was as if the officer knew her, or worse, was watching her. I stood there, gripping the violation notice as the cruiser rolled by. Something in my gut twisted. This wasn't just about a fence. Not anymore. And I had no idea how far they were willing to go. But things were about to get much darker, and much, much uglier. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a minute. I kept pacing the living room, staring out the windows, replaying Karen's voice in my head. Something inside me refused to accept that this was just a simple HOA issue. There was a tone in her voice, a cold sharpness like she was following someone else's orders. The next morning felt heavier than usual. I brewed coffee and stepped out onto the porch just as the neighborhood started waking up. Joggers, dog walkers, sprinklers hissing across perfectly trimmed lawns, the usual quiet suburban performance. But beneath it all, I felt watched. At 8:17 a.m., I found the first envelope. No stamp, no name. Just slid under my door. Inside was one line, typed in bold black letters. "Tear down the fence or you'll regret it." My spine turned cold. This wasn't the HOA. This was someone trying to scare me. I marched straight to the HOA office. A small, newly renovated building with shiny glass windows and a cheaply made Community Harmony Center sign. The whole place looked fake, like a cover more than an office. Inside, I found Karen sitting with 2 board members. She hid the envelope under some papers the moment she saw me. "We're in a meeting," she said curtly. "I need answers," I said. "Who sent this?" I dropped the threat letter on the table. She barely glanced at it. "Anonymous complaints are common. We can't control residents." "This isn't a complaint," I shot back. "It's a threat." "Not our problem," she said. folding her arms again, but the man sitting beside her, an older board member with gray hair and tired eyes, kept staring at the envelope, like it meant more to him than he let on. "Do you recognize that?" I asked him. He opened his mouth to speak, but Karen's hand slammed down on the table. "Robert." "Don't." Their eyes locked, and for a fraction of a second, I saw fear move across his face. Something was wrong inside that board. Very wrong. I leaned closer. "Tell me what's going on." Karen stood up abruptly. "Meeting over. Leave." Her voice cracked slightly. Not anger. Something closer to panic. As I walked out, Robert slipped something into my hand. A folded sticky note. I didn't read it until I got outside. It said, "Check your old permits." Something changed. My heart pounded. I rushed home, dug into my garage cabinet, and pulled out the dusty plastic bin where I kept all the old home documents. Receipts, warranty cards, blueprints, and near the bottom, the old city permit. Fence installation approved. Signed by the inspector. Dated. Stamped. Official. But the section marked HOA approval had been torn off, not cut. Ripped. And as I ran my finger along the ragged edge, I realized something terrifying. Someone had gone into my documents. Someone had removed that proof. Someone who knew exactly where to look. My front door suddenly rattled. 3 heavy knocks. I froze. "Police! Open up!" I opened the door, heart hammering. A uniformed officer stood there with a clipboard, unreadable expression. "Mr. Porter, we received a report that you made threats toward the HOA board this morning." My mouth went dry. "What? No, who filed that?" He looked down at his sheet. HOA President Karen Delmont. Of course, I tried to explain. "Officer, I didn't threaten anyone." I showed them a threat letter someone gave me. "She's retaliating." He shook his head slowly. "Sir, I don't have the authority to investigate that. I'm just here to warn you." He paused, lowering his voice. "But off the record, be careful. Something about that board doesn't sit right with us." "Us?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just looked past me at the blue fence behind my house, then back at me with a quiet seriousness. Then he left. And as the cruiser rolled away, I felt my stomach twist with dread. Whatever the HOA was hiding, it was big enough to involve the police, big enough to tear apart our entire community, and I was already in the middle of it. I spent the entire night in my garage with the old permits spread across the table like evidence at a crime scene. Every time I tried to rest, my eyes kept drifting to that torn corner, the missing HOA approval, the part someone had ripped out of my life as neatly as they tried to rip out my fence. My wife's handwriting was all over that document, her neat looping cursive labeling the measurements and paint color. Seeing that missing piece felt like losing her again. Around 4 a.m., when the sky outside looked like bruised purple, I finally remembered something. Laura had scanned every home document years ago. She was the organized one. She said paper faded, but digital memories don't. Her old laptop was still in the cabinet above the washing machine, covered in dust and untouched since she passed. My hands were shaking when I plugged it in. It took nearly 10 minutes just to boot up. But when it did, her wallpaper, our photo at the lake, hit me like a punch to the heart. I opened her documents folder. There it was. Fence, permit, final.pdf. I clicked it, holding my breath, and suddenly the missing section appeared on the screen just as clear as the day we filed it. The signature of the previous HOA president, the approval stamp, even his email address proof. But something else caught my eye. A folder inside the folder called HOA Emails, Archive. My mouth went dry. It was filled with printed copies of email threads between Laura and the old HOA president. She must have saved them as PDFs. I opened the most recent one. The date made my stomach twist. It was 2 weeks before she died. The email chain was short but devastating. From HOA President Daniel G. to Laura Porter. Subject: RE. Fence approval. Laura, you have nothing to worry about. Your permit is approved and logged. However, I want you to know something privately. There is a group inside our board trying to undo older approvals. I'm keeping an eye on it. Be careful." Danielle held the laptop like it weighed 1,000 pounds. A group inside the board? Trying to undo older approvals? Trying to erase the very fence she fought for? My head spun. I clicked the next email. It was from him again, dated a week before she passed. "Laura, if anyone asks about the permit, do not hand out your original copy. Keep it safe. Some members are acting suspicious. If something changes, I'll let you know. Stay well," Danielle whispered into the empty garage. What were you trying to warn her about? I opened the last email in the chain. It had no response from her, probably because by then she was too sick. This one chilled me to the bone. "Laura, I think they got to my files. Someone removed old approvals from the system. If anything happens, show your documents. Don't trust the board. And definitely don't trust Karen Delmont." Danielle closed the laptop slowly, hands trembling. Karen wasn't just enforcing rules, she was covering tracks. Tracks that started long before she became president. Tracks that maybe my wife had stumbled into. As I stared at the laptop screen, a thought hit me with horrifying clarity. Had the board been doing this to other people too? Before I could gather myself, a movement outside the window caught my attention. A shadow. Slow. Creeping. I stepped to the window, heart pounding. Someone was standing in my yard. At first I thought it was just a neighbor, until I saw the figure kneel beside my fence and run a gloved hand along one of the boards, inspecting it like it was evidence. My pulse hammered. This wasn't a vandal. This wasn't a kid. This was someone checking the fence. For removal, I banged on the glass. "Hey!" The figure jerked up, turned, and sprinted across the yard. I ran outside, but by the time I reached the street, a dark SUV was already speeding away. No plates, no decals, no lights. I stood barefoot on the cold pavement, watching the headlights disappear into the early dawn, and I whispered to myself, "This has gone way past the HOA." But I had no idea how far it would go next, and what came next shook everything I believed about my neighbors. By the time the sun rose, my nerves felt raw. I sat on the porch with the laptop on my knees, scrolling through the emails again and again. Every line felt heavier, every warning more desperate. My wife had known something was wrong, and the old HOA president had known even more. I needed answers. Real ones. Not the garbage Karen kept feeding me. So I took the printed copies of the emails, the digital permit, and marched straight to the precinct. The station didn't open officially until 9 a.m., but one of the officers from the night shift recognized me immediately, the same one who had warned me the day before. "Morning," he said cautiously. "You look like hell." "Because this neighborhood is rotten," I said. "I need to report something." He led me inside and sat me at a small metal desk in the corner. "All right, what's going on?" I told him everything. The torn permit, the threats, the shadow in my yard, the emails from the old HOA president, the warnings about Karen. When I finished, he ran a hand down his face. "Damn, that's a lot." I pushed the emails toward him. "Can you investigate this?" He was about to respond when the door to the precinct swung open hard enough to rattle the reception desk. In walked Karen. Her heels clicked like gunshots on tile. Her hair perfect, her expression cold and deadly. Behind her were 2 board members and, my stomach dropped, a sergeant. The same sergeant who often attended HOA events. The same sergeant who lived 3 streets away. The same sergeant Karen always spoke to like they were old friends. Karen smiled at me like a predator. "Well, well," she said. "Looks like we had the same idea." The officer beside me stiffened. I could practically feel him thinking, "Oh, hell." Karen turned to the sergeant. "Sergeant Linwood, this man has been harassing our board, making threats, and now he's spreading conspiracy theories." I shot to my feet. "That's a lie." The sergeant raised his hand sharply. "Sit down." The officer beside me stepped in. "With respect, sir, he came here voluntarily. He has real evidence." I said, "Sit down," the sergeant repeated, staring him down. The room felt suddenly colder. Karen folded her arms smugly. "I want to file a restraining order." she said. Effective immediately. I felt my heart drop. You can't do that, she cut me off. You stepped onto HOA property without permission. You intimidated the board. You banged on the conference table in anger. That's not what happened, I growled. She smirked like she enjoyed every second of this. The sergeant turned to me. Until further notice, you are not to approach the HOA building, any board member, or any HOA meeting. The officer beside me looked furious. Sergeant, come on, this is not right. You know it, the sergeant glared at him. That's an order. My hands shook with rage and disbelief. Karen wasn't just connected to the board. She wasn't just bullying neighbors, she had the police on a leash. I walked out of the precinct shaking, the emails clutched in my fist. The officer who tried to help me followed me outside quietly. Listen, he said, looking around nervously. You're in something deep. Deeper than fence codes. These board members? They've been reported before. Financial issues. Backdoor deals. Property extortion. I stared at him. Extortion? You're serious? He nodded. But the reports kept disappearing. My stomach twisted. Disappearing? Like the permits? Yes, he said, voice low. And the sergeant? He's close to the board. Too close, I already knew. I could feel it now, like a noose tightening. He stepped closer. If you want to survive this, keep your head down, and don't fight this alone. But as he walked away, I realized something. I was alone. Me. One old man with a fence and a dead wife's emails. Against an HOA, a police sergeant, and something even bigger lurking behind them. I looked back at my blue fence. Her fence. Our fence. And I whispered to myself, I'm not taking it down. I don't care who comes for me. What I didn't know was that within 24 hours, someone would come for me, and this time they weren't going to hide in the shadows. The next day didn't feel like a normal morning. It felt like the air itself was warning me to stay inside, to stay quiet, to let whatever storm was brewing pass me by. But I couldn't. Something inside me, maybe stubbornness, maybe Laura's voice, kept pushing, telling me there was more to uncover, that this wasn't just about a fence, or fines, or power-hungry board members. This was about a truth someone was desperate to bury. Every instinct told me I needed help. Someone outside the neighborhood. Someone who didn't answer to Karen or the crooked sergeant, so I called the only person I trusted even a little, Officer Reynolds, the cop who had warned me before. He didn't pick up. Instead, he texted, "Meet me behind the HOA office. Do not go inside. Don't tell anyone." My stomach dropped. That building, that cursed little glass box suddenly felt like the beating heart of everything wrong in this neighborhood. But I had no choice. I waited until sunset. The sky turned a sickly orange, the kind that makes the world look like it's fading at the edges. I walked across the street, careful, watching the windows. Every shadow felt suspicious. Reynolds was already behind the building, pacing like he was wrestling with something inside his head. "You came alone?" he asked. "Yes." "Good," he said. "Because if anyone knew what I'm about to show you, I'd lose my badge." He pulled a keycard from his pocket, silver, stamped with the HOA's logo. Not a police access card. An HOA internal one. "Where did you get that?" I whispered. He stared at the card, jaw tight. "From a board member. Someone who's scared of Karen. Someone who wants this whole thing to end." I didn't ask who. His eyes told me he wouldn't say. He slipped the card into a side door on the building. One I had never noticed before. No windows, no signs. Just a plain gray steel door like something you'd see in a warehouse. The lock clicked. "Come on," he said, "and stay quiet." The hallway inside was dim and narrow, lit by buzzing fluorescent lights. My heart hammered as he led me past the main office walls. The building wasn't big, but it felt like it stretched deeper than it should. Wrong, somehow. Reynolds stopped in front of another locked door, this one with a keypad. "You're not going to believe this," he muttered. The door clicked open, and what I saw inside made my breath freeze. A room filled with file cabinets. Rows and rows of them, metal, old, stuffed, full. But that wasn't the part that made my skin crawl. It was the Labels, complaints, suppressed. Permits, revoked. Home violations, priority targets. Police. Coordination notes. I stepped closer, hardly breathing. This is illegal, I whispered. Illegal. Reynolds laughed bitterly. This is organized corruption. These files go back over 10 years, and I've already seen things in here that could end careers. I pulled open one cabinet with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of folders of residents I recognized. Neighbors who had been bullied, fined, intimidated, even evicted, and every file showed the same pattern. The HOA targeted people whose house values they wanted, or whose property they planned to seize, or who spoke out, and worst of all, every folder had a section marked Law Enforcement Notes, the sergeant's handwriting. Jesus, I whispered. They worked together. Reynolds nodded grimly. Karen, the sergeant, and 2 previous board members. They funnel reports, remove evidence, use fines to pressure people to sell, then flip the properties and pocket the difference. It's a racket. My stomach turned. My fence? He opened another drawer and pulled out a folder. My address. Your fence has nothing to do with codes, he said. They want your lot. It's one of the biggest in the neighborhood. High resale value. They've been trying to market as a violation property for months. I stared at the files, shaking, feeling the rage burn from my chest into my hands. They tried to erase my wife's permit. They didn't try, he said softly. They did. I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw hurt. Reynolds grabbed my arm suddenly. We need to go. Now. Someone's coming. The hallway creaked. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Too familiar. Karen's voice echoed through the walls. Sergeant, I want every room checked. He's been snooping. My blood froze. They were looking for me. Reynolds pulled me into a small storage room, pressing a finger to his lips. We held our breath as their voices grew closer. He knows something, the sergeant growled. I told you we should have handled him earlier. He's old, Karen snapped. He was supposed to give up. Their footsteps stopped outside the filing room door, the room we had just been inside. Reynolds whispered in my ear. We won't survive if we're caught. The door handle rattled. My heart slammed against my ribs. And then, the building's alarm system suddenly screamed through the halls. A high-pitched siren that jolted all 3 floors. What the hell? Karen yelled. Reynolds grabbed my arm. Run! We bolted down the back hallway through an emergency exit, into the freezing night, but as we sprinted across the lot, headlights flared in my eyes. Police cruisers screeched to a stop in front of us, and the sergeant stepped out with his hand on his holster. You just made a very big mistake, he snarled. I thought. That was the end, but I had no idea. The real war hadn't even started yet. The world slowed down the moment the sergeant put his hand on his gun. The parking lot lights above us flickered. My breath hung in the air. Reynolds stood frozen beside me, caught between his badge and his conscience. Step forward, the sergeant barked at me. I didn't move. You've been trespassing, stealing documents, interfering with an investigation. Investigation? I shot back. You mean the crimes you're covering up? The neighborhoods you've ruined? The people you've pushed out of their homes? His face twisted in rage. You don't know anything, but I did. And worse, I knew now he wasn't bluffing. This man was capable of anything. He lifted the gun halfway. Reynolds stepped in front of me instantly. You fire that weapon without reason, Reynolds said quietly, and the entire station will know. The body cam logs will know. Dispatch will know. I'm not letting you do this. The sergeant's eyes shook. For a moment, just one moment, before he realized something. Reynolds wasn't wearing his body cam, neither was he. Then, a new sound cut through the air. Voices. Dozens of them. Growing. Rising. We all turned toward the street, and there they were, my neighbors, the old couples. Parents with kids, teenagers, veterans, even people who barely spoke to me before. They filled the sidewalk, spilling into the street, holding phones, flashlights, recording everything. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone." Another voice, "We know what the HOA's been doing." Someone else yelled, "We're done being bullied." The sergeant stiffened. Cameras were everywhere now, live streaming, circling him like wolves. And Karen, creeping out from behind the building, suddenly looked small. Tiny, even, under the weight of a community she once controlled through fear. Reynolds whispered to me, "One chance. Get the evidence out." I raised the folder of stolen HOA documents and held them up high. "This," I shouted, "is what they didn't want you to see." Phones lifted. People pressed closer. The sergeant took a step back. "These files show every complaint they buried," I announced, voice trembling but loud enough to shake the air. "Every family they targeted. Every permit they tore up. Every illegal property grab." Gasps rippled through the crowd. I held up the printed emails from my wife's folder. "And this is proof they've been at this for years. My wife tried to warn us before she died. The old HOA president tried to expose them. These people," I pointed at Karen and the sergeant, "covered it all up. Chaos erupted. People shouting, crying, filming, calling news stations. And for the first time in years, I saw fear in Karen's eyes. "Call backup," she hissed at the sergeant. "Oh, I already did," a familiar voice said behind her. We turned. 2 more officers walked forward. "Not from our precinct, state investigators." Reynolds exhaled in relief. I called IA, Internal Affairs. "They've been watching the sergeant for months," Karen sputtered. "He's lying." The IA officer held up a warrant. "Ma'am, we have grounds to detain you and seize the HOA property for investigation." The sergeant lunged for his gun, but before he could even touch it, 3 IA officers pinned him against the cruiser. Karen tried to run. She didn't make it 3 steps. The whole crowd watched as they were handcuffed, read their rights, and loaded into unmarked cars. The moment they were driven away, something strange happened. Silence. Soft. Heavy. Healing. Reynolds put a hand on my shoulder. "You saved this neighborhood." "No," I said, looking at the crowd. "We all did." Neighbors stepped forward, patting my back, thanking me, crying. One woman hugged me so tightly I could feel her heartbeat racing against my chest. And then I turned toward the blue fence. Her fence. The moonlight washed over it, soft and silver. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle across my chest. Reynolds walked beside me. "You know," he said quietly, "with all this evidence, the district attorney is going to tear that HOA apart." I nodded. "Good. What will you do now?" he asked. I touched the fence gently, running my fingers across the grain the way I used to when Laura stood beside me. "I'm going to rebuild," I said. "Not the fence. The community," he smiled. "And the fence?" I smiled too, tired but full. "The fence stays. It always stays." The next morning, the neighborhood gathered at my yard. Not for a protest. Not for a fight. They came to repaint the fence. Every stroke of blue felt like a heartbeat. Every laugh felt like healing. Every face felt like family. And in that moment I realized the fence didn't break the HOA. The truth did. The community did. My wife's courage did. And her memory, embedded deep in the wood and deeper in my soul, would outlast every corrupt board, every bully, every threat. Because the fence wasn't just wood, it was a promise. One I planned to keep.